Greetings, this is Artie from Artifact Electronics. Today on center stage we have an old friend. It's a 1978 Atari Super Breakout machine. We originally had a two-part series where the board got repaired, the cosmetics on the cabinet got updated, and the electronics work. It's playable, but the monitor really doesn't look too good. Options for the monitor, of course, I thought it's a black and white composite monitor. I figured it shouldn't be that hard to get a replacement, but that proved to be impossible. I couldn't find one. Next choice would have been a 19-inch television, CRT television, which would pose some mounting problems. I mean, you can shoehorn it in there eventually, but one of the biggest problems with that is that they don't turn on automatically when you apply power to them. So you would have to have an extra power switch to start the monitor every time, or the TV every time you turn on the machine. And of course the next option is to put an LCD monitor in there, but the same problems. Mounting it, getting it to turn on when power is applied to the whole machine, and of course it's an LCD monitor. That just doesn't look right. So let's turn her on and see she magically fixed herself. Doubtful, but you can always hope. Takes a really long time for the screen to light up. I mean, the only indication, of course, is that the marquee lights up and the 25 cents lights up, but other than that, there's really no indication that this game is on. But I can see the screen starting to fade in, and there it is. And if you remember the last episode, it's fine. There's no distortion on the screen or anything. It's just the tube is really weak. I can't really focus it properly, and I can't get the brightness high enough to have the text show up nicely. I mean, I can get the brightness higher, but there's a tremendous amount of blooming when the brightness gets more turned up. And another artifact here is that it actually looks better on video than it looks in real life. It looks real crappy in real life. But, you know, I can't leave well enough alone. Got to get this working one way or the other. I mean, not working, but I got to get it to be presentable and fun to play. And I think one thing that I neglected to do is, here I am blaming the monitor, but I don't think we ever hooked up a different monitor to the game board to see if maybe the problem lies in the game board. So let's do that. I hooked up a Panasonic composite monitor, so let's go turn her on again and see if the board at least outputs proper video. And as you can see, it does. The text looks normal, everything looks normal. Yeah, the picture's a little bit too tall. The left border is like in the overscan area, but I'm not going to bother adjusting this because this monitor works fine with 8-bit game consoles and stuff like that, so I'm not going to mess up that. But this kind of proves to us that the board is outputting video properly. So let's pull the bezel so we can see the screen again in its natural beauty. With all the bezels removed, you can see the ridiculous burn-in on this monitor. The bricks up there, the paddle and text area on the bottom, which probably has something to do with the monitor not being able to display anything properly. But anyway, I haven't done the most obvious thing here. to this monitor, and that is doing a cap kit on it. I generally don't like just not diagnosing a problem and throwing a cap kit at it and hoping that it'll fix it. I had measured voltages on it. Everything looked fine. Voltages, ripple, everything was okay. But with something like this, and since it's difficult for me to find a replacement, I think I want to pull out this monitor and just do a cap kit, see if it makes any difference at all. Here are the cap kits I got. I had to get two because the cap kit on the right, which has most of the PCB caps, did not include the power supply caps. And the reason for that is those two caps you see on the left, they're actually in a multi-cap can in the original monitor. And so maybe that's a reason why. Anyway, they're sold separately. The kit on the left costs like $2 more than the kit on the right. But they're all Nichicon 105 degree caps, so doesn't get much better than this when you're recapping your monitor. So let's get out the monitor and get started on that. We got the monitor on the bench, and let's have a look at the power supply cap, the multi-cap can, which is sitting right there. This one actually has two capacitors inside. One is, what is the one? 450 microfarad at 200 volts. And the other one is 100 microfarad at 160 volts. And then it's got two terminals which are common ground. Both of the caps are grounded on there. Now there's three trains of thought on how to replace these. One, the most obvious one, is to find an exact replacement. That's generally difficult and gets expensive, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time finding one. Ergo, I didn't find one, and we got to go to the second option. The second option is, of course, to replace them with individual caps, like those two that came in the kit. And there's two subcategories on how to do that. The one is, if this was a really valuable piece of antique equipment, you would cut open the can, remove all of the old cap stuff in there, shove these two guys in there, solder them to the, and connect them, and then close the whole thing back up again. You'd probably have to use like some heater tape, metallic tape to close it up, and it'll look mostly original. However, that's kind of a lot of work, and again, I'm not too worried about keeping this looking original. So we get to the third option, which really is using these caps but soldering directly underneath the chassis. Basically disconnecting that guy, leaving him in there so things look nice and beautiful from the outside, but we'll have good caps on the inside. A problem with option 2, which is putting the caps inside of the old can, is you're going to put the caps in there and then you're going to seal it, and that may cause temperature problems. The temperature in there, if it rises, it really has no way of escaping. And yes, you can drill holes into there, but as you can see, I'm not too enthusiastic about doing that. And back to option 1 is getting a direct replacement will make replacing it a lot easier, but I feel that the quality of the capacitors you get in a remade one are most likely not going to be as good as the quality of the Nichicons, the 105 volt Nichicons. So the approach we're going to take is basically disconnect the existing one and then mount the new ones underneath, and that should functionally give us the best result. There's the underneath of the cap. There's these two terminals over here that are tied together with a black wire coming off, which is the common ground. Both caps have a common ground. We have the red wire on the left, which is the 470 microfarad tap, and the orange wire on the right, which is a 100 microfarad tap. What I'm going to do is desolder red and orange, measure what, basically taking the cap out of circuit and measuring it, and then the next question is where do we put the individual caps? But the universe has given us a solution. If you look at that terminal strip over there, there are 3 unused tabs. Well, not really. The center one is screwed to the chassis, but that's connected to the black wire. That's ground. So I can use that to put the individual caps in. But let's get those wires off and do some measuring. Let's measure the old values and the new values. I got both wires off, so we got this one, which was the smaller cap, and then these 2, which are the larger cap, tied together. And they left ground on because this effectively takes the cap out of circuit. And let's first clip onto ground. And then clip on to the one on the left, which is the 450 microfarad. I have discharged the caps by shorting each one of these lugs to ground, and not just momentary, but I clipped them on and counted to 3 and then took them off so it doesn't blow out my meter. But let's see what the 450 microfarad cap reports. Taking its own sweet time because it's basically trying to charge up the cap. And the 400 has become 562. The ESR is good with a 2.8% loss. Remember those when we... No, actually don't, because we're going to compare them right now. I am going to take the new cap over here, clip that on, and see what that measures at. And that one says, and again it takes its own sweet time to charge up the cap. And these are, so this one has an ESR of 0.22, a loss of 0.6%, which is significantly better than the other one, and it's almost dead on with the capacitance. So the other one's beginning to go. It's not going to cause major problems yet, but with the capacitance increasing, it is obviously headed out to pasture. So what we do now is we hook up to the other cap. So black goes to ground, and red goes to the other lug, the remaining lug on the underneath. And this one is supposed to be 100 microfarads at 160 volts. This should be a bit faster. And the existing one's actually not that bad. 0.5 ESR, 2% loss, and about 120 microfarads. So now, comparing that to the new guy, which is over here, and the new guy says oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's because the leads were touching. The tester leads were touching. So let's do that again. They're not touching now. And after patiently waiting, it's telling us that this one's 93 microfarads, ESR of 0.5, which is almost the same, and a loss of 0.8%. So the caps in here aren't really bad yet, considering that this monitor is, let's see, 1978. So that's about, these caps are over 40 years old, and it doesn't look like this was ever replaced. So off we go. Let's put the new caps in on the terminal strip and then continue from there. And here's the result of phase 1. So really all I did was I removed the wires from the positive taps on the multi-cap can. I mounted these two caps over here. The centers are connected to ground, and this lug is actually screwed to the chassis, which is connected to the original ground, which you should make sure with a to test continuity that is actually true, and not from the lug to here, but rather from the individual capacitor legs to here. And then I just mounted the orange wire to the 100 microfarad caps, positive end, and the two red wires that were here to the 470 microfarad cap. And that's that. It looks perfectly original from the top. And these caps are going nowhere. Yeah, there's a little flex here, but nothing too bad. So now let's turn our attention to the other 568 caps that are on the main PCB. And now to the rest of the capacitors, which are mounted on the PCB. So there's two kinds of capacitors. This type, which has the two leads coming out of the same end, are called radial capacitors. And as you can see, most of the caps, or let's say a lot of the existing caps, are radial. These guys over here, there's some, you can't see that, but there's one over here, and just a bunch more sprinkled around. But you'll also notice that there's another type of capacitor, which is called an axial capacitor, which is this, which has one lead coming out each end. And we can right away see this blue guy over here is axial. Now the kit I got is, they're all radial. And it doesn't surprise me because they don't make that many axial capacitors anymore. And you'll just have to, in this case, install it here, but basically install it upright and bend the leads so that they fit into the holes, and hope that the lead length on the ones that are supplied are long enough to let you be able to do that. The other thing to watch out for is do the capacitors one by one. Do not go in and remove every single one of them and then hope that the list tells you exactly which designator is which capacitor. Yeah, it'll take a little bit longer, but it's much safer to do them one by one. And we can see there's another axial one hiding over here. Another very important thing is to make sure that the board is clearly marked with the polarity. These are electrolytic capacitors, and the polarity has to be observed, otherwise you will see magic smoke, and you'll see it very quickly. If by any chance there is no marking either on top or on the bottom of the board, use a marker before removing it to mark, for instance, the negative side. or the positive if you prefer. Just be consistent across the board that you mark either positive or negative for all of them before you remove them so that you can insert the new one properly. So the capacitors we looked at initially, they're over here. And we can see these are clearly marked. These happen to be marked with a positive. Also, I'm going to be able to remove, I think, most of the capacitors without actually removing the PCB. But as luck would have it, there's this bar going across here that may have capacitors that are right underneath here. But looks like that bar comes off. There's 3 screws holding it in place. So if there are capacitors with their leads are obscured by the bar, I can probably take this bar out and clean up those caps too. Interestingly enough, the very first capacitor I randomly picked to replace is one of the gray ones I showed you, and it's loose. And after closely looking at the solder joint, it looks like this was replaced at some point in time. But this lead is loose. There's solder here, but it doesn't connect to the lead. And I mean, you can't see the lead moving because it's cut really short and it's actually not poking through. So that's a great place to start. Use your desoldering method of choice. Getting capacitors out is not very difficult. You can use solder braid, manual solder sucker. I use my desoldering gun because that's easy. I mean, just let me see here. Probably obscuring your view completely, but you know, you just desolder. You stick it on the joint, and then on the second one, let's see if I can melt some wires while I'm doing this. Come on. And after doing that, and not burning anything on your desk, the cap comes right out, and we'll just put a new one in. Now I'm not going to measure every single cap, but and these look okay, no leakage. But as you can see, yeah, removing caps is pretty easy. The procedure is what you should really stick to, which is, you know, remove them one by one and make sure that it's clear to you what the polarity of the one you're replacing is. So then when you look at it, even though I said you do them one by one, that only goes as far as inserting the new one and bending the leads so they stay in place. But I usually I remove one, insert the proper one, do a few of them in the same area, and then solder them all at once. I remember we saw this one axial capacitor, and I said they don't supply them. Well, this one isn't supplied at all. This was the axial that was next to the gray electrolytics. So this is non-polarized. And I took it out anyway. I tested it. It's 0.01 microfarad at 630 volts, and it tests good with a loss of 0.8%, and it's about 0.011. So I guess these don't go bad. So this is going right back in again, and we'll continue on our merry way. We'll solder these over here and follow this procedure throughout the board. Okay, I finished recapping it. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. And it's still a bit fuzzy, but look, you can now read the text clearly on the bottom, the score. It's still a bit fuzzy. I got the contrast, not the contrast, the focus. I had to turn it up all the way. But this is as good as it's going to get. I think the remainder of these problems are caused by the tube itself because of the heavy burning. I don't think it's the phosphor that's that effect. Well, it's the phosphor that gets... Alright, I finished recapping it. Laid it on the ground and plugged it in. And what do we have? Well, first of all, it still works. Nothing went up in smoke. But after adjusting things a little bit, notice you can now read the text on the bottom and the score. Things are still a bit fuzzy, and you can definitely see the burn-in now. But it's become much more acceptable, and keep in mind that the bezels are going to hide some of this. So what I need to do is slide this thing back into the unit and put the bezels back on and readjust things. Problem is, the only thing with the focus is turned up all the way and it's still a bit fuzzy. The focus won't go anymore. So that's pretty much the best it's going to be. But I think we'll be okay once I put the bezels back in place. So before the monitor goes in, one last look at the burn-in, which of course is unfixable. Somebody once asked me on a repair video I had on a Ms. Pac-Man, "Do tell us how to fix the burn-in." The only way to fix that is put in a new tube, and I think this is what's causing the problems with the focus. But as we saw before, with carefully adjusting things, we may be able to get away with this. Okay, the machine's back together and it looks pretty good. I'll show you in a minute, but here's the bad guys. In all honesty, there were two caps I could not reach. I would have had to disassemble the entire frame, and there were small value caps. I don't think they would have made a huge difference, but it would have taken me a really long time. So I didn't replace them, but I replaced everything else, and it seems to have done wonders. Of course, the bad multi-cap can is missing. That's still in there, making the device look good. One thing that I found is one of the values in the cap kit was wrong. It was specified as being 22 microfarads, but when I pulled the cap, it was 2.2 microfarads, and it looked original. But I double-checked with the schematic and the parts list, and both the schematic and parts list showed that cap to be a 2.2 microfarad. Fortunately, I had one available, and I put that one in. There was one other cap that was not stuffed in the current chassis, and you could clearly tell that it wasn't there from the factory because the holes were filled with solder, and it looked factory. The moral of the whole thing is remove the caps one by one and double check. Make sure to compare the cap that you removed to the cap in the kit, and if they're not the same, do some more research, such as looking at the schematics or the parts list, before deciding whether to put in the cap from the kit or the cap from the schematics. And then everything should be okay. Other than that, let's have a look and see what the game looks like now with everything reinstalled. I think it actually looks a lot better because you can actually read the text on the bottom of the screen and the scores. I've tried to align the color overlay, and that's very difficult because even though I've recapped it, the more bricks you make disappear, the screen changes in size slightly. So the deeper you get into a game, the more disaligned the screen graphics become with the color overlay, but we're just going to have to live with that. And other than that, let's see if I can at least clear one board. Okay, here we go. I chose the cavity one. I generally ignore the extra balls because they just confuse you. It's like multi-ball in pinball games. It's nice to get multi-ball, but a lot of times you can't make a lot of the shots because there's so many balls on the play field. They deflect your shot. In this case, it just confuses you and you can't figure out, as two of the balls are approaching the paddle, making a choice which one to get. And I found that on the long run, it's much better to just concentrate on one ball and let the other ones go. But let's see. I used to play the predecessor to this, just plain Breakout, a lot when I was an undergraduate in college. Definitely a classic game. All I got to do is get myself an Arkanoid cabinet and put that next to this. See, there you go. Not doing too good here. At least the cavity balls are gone. No distractions from there. Oh well. High score 11-17, and I got 231 points. Oh, what the hell. Let's play a game of Progressive. I guess this one's endless. I don't think you can clear the board because new bricks keep scrolling in from the top. I guess I won't find out. Come on, sneak in there. Nah. Well, that was nice. Well, I guess for completeness we should play a double, which is the third mode. Yeah, I guess I should be ready. Oh, I forgot there's two balls. Oh no! Well, that's easy. Oh, this is really confusing. But this is essentially now the original Breakout with a stationary brick field. Except I wish they had a dip switch where you could delete the upper paddle, this one, and then it would be normal Breakout. Fail. Anyway, it's a fun game. Thanks for watching. I hope you got some tips on how to approach recapping a monitor. And it does make a difference. I mean, I neglected to do it on this one, but it definitely let me adjust the playfield to the point where you can read the text and it looks much better. I'm still on a quest to find a better tube for this, to have it nice and sharp, but I think it's fully acceptable the way it is right now. So again, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. And we'll see you next time.